Alan, I think this is a fascinating part of the conversation. I'm personally dying to know how you did get in the door of G Research and why they did it an insular, very close, tight knit group. What pain were they feeling that was so intense that it's all right, fine, we'll go create an OSPO to fix this? Is the first question.
The pain or the anticipated pain was that because they were so insular, they were often doing a terrible thing, which is taking open source software and forking it internally. And then you bear the operational burden of patching the thing every time the new release in the open source world comes out. And the reason why the company was seeing fit to build an open source team was that the VP of engineering was somebody who came from Rackspace and who had seen this exact same anti-pattern evolve in Rackspace and knew just how painful it could be. And so to head that off at the pass, he had joined G Research maybe a year prior. And to head that off at the pass, he reached out. In fact, well, there's a long story about that, but we connected and he proposed this thing, and I made a proposal about how it would all work to the company, and it was approved, and so we started this journey. Yeah, if you want like a half hour aside, we can talk about how I ran into him randomly on the streets in London on the busiest day in the summer. But that's a long story. It's
The other question would be, so talk a little bit about what language did you use? How do you describe that monetary value? Um,
Yeah, we generally talk about it in sort of a spectrum from very clear and obvious financial uh, reward or savings to very, very nebulous reward or savings. Um, the and there's a wide spectrum in between, but on the very clear and obvious, there have been licenses that we've been paying for on projects that we would rather not be using, things that are old and archaic. We can't get the attention of the developers. They're not providing support for us any longer. And there's an open source alternative that if only it had a few more features, we could just move to and save ourselves the license costs. Those are some very, very easy and clear things to communicate to finance department. We're going to save you $500,000. Sound good? Okay, I'm going to put $250,000 worth of engineering effort on it for a year, and then we're going to save the like. That's really clear. On the other end of the spectrum, there are all the sort of intangibles around company profile and goodwill in the community and the ability to hire, um, attrition rates and things like that. Uh, and then there are things in the middle like developer productivity. When we solve a problem that improves our build times by 10 minutes, how many builds are the engineers doing over the course of a year? You can kind of estimate that stuff and come up with a round number of like, all right, we could estimate this at savings of 400 grand a year. Tell you what, we're just going to cut that in half and say 200 grand we saved. Do some math like that. But we know that it's non-zero. We know that we have some of the parameters around it. And so we do that kind of fuzzy math. And at the other end of the spectrum, I mentioned talent and attrition. There are numbers that you can get out around that. We work with our talent acquisition and marketing teams to say, look, we've improved. We know our ability to hire. It has become easier because we've been talking about our open source work. We can point to the open source work as examples of the work that we do inside that we normally can't talk about, but we can talk about the open source stuff. And it's been easier to hire, even if it has shaved this much time off of the time to hire. That time to hire we can equate in terms of the talent acquisitions costs, the team costs, and again give us some sort of conservative number on that. And then you add up this spectrum of very direct costs to very indirect costs. And in my experience so far, it always comes out to way, way more than the cost of doing business for your team. But it takes a lot of work actually to go through each one of your projects to identify the things that have made the company money or saved the company money, and do some math that people can nod their heads to, add the whole thing up, and get buy-in that, yeah, this really happened, that you did actually affect all of that. And that has to permeate from the engineering, throughout the engineering teams that you're working with, all the way up to, in our case, the board of directors of the company. So a lot of the work that I do is making sure that that is communicated and that is understood. And because we've been successful at that, we've grown from 3 people to 30 or so. So